Hey everyone, and welcome to Satisfactory News. Satisfactory has a pretty large map with a very diverse set of biomes and a distribution of resources that is specifically designed to make some areas better than others for certain types of materials or factories. In this video, I'm going to show you the ideal spot for various types of production, as well as certain infrastructure. I'll be considering both basic production as well as where you're likely to want to expand to as you progress in the game. If you'd prefer to figure this out yourself, then maybe skip this video. But if you're struggling with doubts about where you've placed your factories or looking for some advice, this video might help you make these decisions. Basic items. Iron, copper, and limestone are available all around the map, but by far the highest density of these resources is in the Dune Desert. The desert is also the largest flat area on the map, making it a great place to mass produce everything from iron plates to heavy modular frames. You can actually scale up a desert factory pretty easily, as deposits of Caterium and coal can also be found nearby, as well as basically unlimited water along the coastline. If you want a lot of basic to middle complexity parts being produced, start in the desert. The Dune Desert is a popular place for megabases or for building space elevator parts due to its vastness. The only things it is explicitly missing are oil and bauxite. So basically everything else in the game can be made here, and everything can if you're willing to just ship in any necessary aluminum or oil products. Trains. Now, I mentioned shipping things in, so before we get into some of these actual products, I want to bring up transportation networks, because while there may be convenient spots to establish certain factories, with enough time and infrastructure you can literally build anything anywhere in this game. And a strong train network is the backbone of doing this. Satisfactory actually contains a vast network of natural roadways that end up being perfect for running trains. One of the most notable and useful runs is between the Dune Desert and the Rocky Desert, creating a passageway to transport oil products between the two locations. Another notable pathway is along the western coast, which connects the Rocky Desert with the grassy fields, again giving you a pretty good route for oil products. There are plenty of other fairly obvious places for trains and trucks to traverse, and you can make a loop around the entire map pretty easily without resorting to giant sky rails. Use these roadways if you would prefer to build where you want, not where the game thinks you should. Fuel power. Pretty much anywhere where oil can be found is perfectly fine for basic fuel power. The only exception is the desert canyon nodes, since they don't have much output compared to the rest. However, for long-term fuel power, one location is better than the others. Turbo fuel combines fuel with compacted coal, which is made from coal and sulfur. This makes the Crater Lake the ideal place to create fuel if you plan on turning it into turbo fuel. Both of those materials can be found in abundance near this location. If you then want to turn that into rocket fuel, you'll need nitric acid, which is made by nitrogen gas, water, and iron plates. There are nitrogen nodes nearby, plenty of water, and even some iron. And if you do decide to go to ionized fuel after that, the only ingredient you need to add is quartz, and there is some reasonably close by. The Spire Coast up in the north is also a decent place to build fuel power, though which of the two is better kind of depends on your playstyle and preferences. All of these same materials are relatively close by, though they are much more spread out than the Crater Lake. But one big advantage is space. Since the Spire Coast borders the ocean, you can build pretty far out on this huge flat plain. Contrast that with the Crater Lake, which is oddly shaped, has a bunch of crazy rock formations, and borders the void at the edge of the map. The other advantage that the Spire Coast has is that it has more oil available, so you can have a larger production there. That said, it really does come down to personal preference, but those are the facts. And of course, by extension of these areas being good for fuel power, plastic and rubber can also be made in these same locations, but most likely you'll want to dedicate these ideal oil nodes for fuel power, and then use the rest of the ones on the map that are unused to work on plastic and rubber. Computers. Computers require copper and oil products, and supercomputers add Caterium into the mix. It kind of feels like oil nodes and copper nodes were purposefully separated, but they're close enough that creating computers anywhere on the map should be easy enough. Caterium, however, makes things a little more interesting. Most Caterium is around the Dune Desert, but there isn't much oil there. There is also some Caterium on the western coastline, but it's a lot more spread out and hard to get to. I would still say that the Dune Desert is probably the best location, especially the southern portion of it. You'll find the densest concentration of Caterium nodes near the border of the desert and the Titan Forest, and you can probably utilize the oil nodes in the desert canyons as well. If you want to expand your computer production into radio control units, it actually makes even more sense, as the quartz crystals needed for crystal oscillators can be found literally right next to those Caterium nodes, minimizing the infrastructure you need to gather both materials. The only issue for radio control units is the aluminum required for them, so let's talk about that next. Aluminum. Aluminum is made from bauxite, which is one of the most inconveniently located materials on the entire map, and no location is particularly great for making aluminum. The swamp is probably the least annoying, since it's at least pretty flat and all on one level. It also has all of the other raw materials you might need in an aluminum process. There's obviously water all around, but you also have a lot of coal just outside the swamp for making the aluminum scrap, and if you're not using all of the quartz in the Titan Forest already, you can use that to make the silica you need. This decision actually gets easier with some alternate recipes though. Pure aluminum ingot and sloppy alumina eliminate the need for silica as well as the silica byproduct, so you can eliminate the need for quartz altogether. By removing quartz, this also makes the other bauxite locations a lot more reasonable. So if you have those alternates, you're pretty safe to make your setup wherever is most convenient for your existing infrastructure. I actually don't mind doing aluminum in the jungle or in the Titan Forest because both are pretty inhospitable to a lot of other factories. So tucking these aluminum factories away in there so at least something is happening there can be kind of nice. Now of course, that's all well and good if you're just making all-clad aluminum sheets to upload to the Dimensional Depot so you can make Mark V belts. But what if you're making some more advanced late-game items? Then the swamp is actually even more compelling. Heat sinks also require copper, and the swamp has more conveniently located copper than any other bauxite source. When you start creating cooling systems, you'll also need nitrogen gas, which can be found nearby the swamp. Even when it comes to rubber, there's actually some oil in the very corner of the swamp, so you don't even have to ship that in from elsewhere. Fused modular frames are mostly the same story, also requiring nitrogen gas. However, building heavy modular frames in the swamp would not be ideal, so you would most likely want to ship those in or ship aluminum casings out to make the frames somewhere else. Nuclear power. Uranium is a pretty rare resource with only 5 nodes on the entire map, all in pretty annoying areas. When building a nuclear plant, you'll want to make sure you have access to plenty of water and that you select an area you won't visit often, so you don't have to worry about radiation. Many players like to transport the uranium from the node to somewhere more convenient, which kind of makes this whole exercise a bit useless. Just build near a coastline and bring all the raw materials in. But if you do want to build near the node, I would recommend the swamp again. The swamp node is in a cave behind a waterfall and there is plenty of water all around. Encased uranium cells require concrete and sulfuric acid, both of which you can make from raw materials that are in the swamp already. Encased industrial beams and electromagnetic control rods will require iron, steel, copper, and Caterium, so the swamp's proximity to the desert is going to be really convenient for shipping those in. You will probably be shipping some of those materials that are abundant in the Dune Desert down to the swamp for your nuclear setup, but again, with so many diverse materials required to make a uranium fuel rod, it would not be unreasonable to just ship it all to a coastal location, especially since you should have pretty good train infrastructure by this point. Advanced items. Advanced items in the final tiers of the game are often combinations of a wide variety of parts. By this point, you should have an expansive train network and access to drones, or at least the ability to create these networks with relative ease. And you should be using these tools to transport items as needed between factories. Sometimes things work out, but rarely will you find that a late game item can be conveniently made all in one location. For example, pressure conversion cubes use iron, copper, steel, concrete, Caterium, aluminum, oil, quartz, and nitrogen. There just isn't anywhere on the map where all of those materials are located right next to each other, so you'll have to at least transport something. So don't get too caught up in finding the perfect location. This game is set up so that many materials will present a challenge to acquire, and that's a good thing. That's part of what Satisfactory is all about. It's all part of the puzzle. If you liked this video or found it useful, I'd love it if you liked it and subscribe to Satisfactory News for more guides like this, and happy constructing.